大家好。
大家好。
好耐我哋冇讀呢個讀你聽啦好耐停咗呢句狄更斯嘅遠大前程第36節，我哋第35次錄音。上回講到邊度啊？
講到阿 pip 佢翻去老家鄉，然後同阿joe嗰啲傾偈咁樣，主要都係講好多，同埋阿 biddy
翻鄉下啫，唔好講到佢好似去咗第二個國家咁。都係坐馬車，都係佢係坐火車定坐馬車？應該坐馬車啫。咁翻到去咁就其實講佢家姐嘅部分唔係好多啦，對佢家姐個感情講幾句就大過咗啦。主要係講邊個啊？
講阿
joe 啦，仲有佢以前識得嘅人啦，係嘛？仲有邊個咧？柯力有冇提到？冇乜點提到。咁biddy 啦，咁其實都係講佢哋之間嗰個隔閡好大都係即係唔係好愉快係嘛？
因為仲叫佢唔使咁早翻，唔使咁翻得咁密定咩？
唔係，即係佢話我好快翻嚟，但係阿biddy就唔信佢。
唔係唔想佢咁早翻。
即係咁講啦，跟住阿 pip 就覺得你又咁樣啱我真係可能唔會咁快翻。咁去到呢個位咁，家姐嘅死都其實對阿 pip 個影響不大，可以咁講。即係去到呢個位，佢都依然仲未的起心肝去做啲乜嘢。咁呢個 Great Expectation 去到呢個位就停滯不前。咁佢亦都知道咗，同 Herbert 都知道咗佢哋爭人哋幾多錢啦。咁點樣還債咧？要諗辦法還債喎，係咪？咁要揾 Mr. Jaggers 啦，係咪？好啦，咁呢個 chapter 睇下會唔會 Mr. Jaggers 出現。第36回 Herbert and I went on from bad to worse, in the way of increasing our debts, looking into our affairs, leaving margins, and the like exemplary transactions. And time went on, whether or no, as he has a way of doing, and I came of age, in fulfillment of Herbert's prediction that I should do so before I knew where I was. Herbert himself had come of age 8 months before me, as he had nothing else than his majority to come into. The event did not make a profound sensation in Bernard's inn, but we had looked forward to my 21st birthday with a crowd of speculations and anticipations, for we had both considered that my guardian could hardly help saying something definite on that occasion. 21st birthday 喎，咁即係佢21歲喎，其實21歲都仲係咁樣，就喺嗰個年代嚟講都幾差。你嗰個年代好細個開始揾食㗎啦，咁佢自己都係，但係佢轉咗行就去做紳士，咁唔識點做紳士。I had taken care to have it well understood in Little Britain that my birthday was. On the day before it, I received an official note from Wemmick, informing me that Mr. Jaggers would be glad if I would call upon him at 5 in the afternoon of the auspicious day. This convinced us that something great was to happen, and threw me into an unusual flutter when I repaired to my guardian's office, a model of punctuality. 即係佢係咪生日諗住人哋送錢俾佢使咧，就冇用咧。In the outer office, Wemmick offered me his congratulations, and incidentally rubbed the side of his nose with a folded piece of tissue paper that I liked the look of. But he said nothing respecting it, and motioned me with a nod into my guardian's room. It was November, and my guardian was standing before his fire, leaning his back against the chimney-piece, with his hands under his coat-tails. Well, Pip, said he, I must call you Mr. Pip today. Congratulations, Mr. Pip. We shook hands, and he is always a remarkably short shaker, and I thanked him. Take a chair, Mr. Pip, said my guardian. As I sat down, and he preserved his attitude to bend his brows at his boots, I felt at a disadvantage, which reminded me of that old time when I had been put upon a tombstone. The two ghastly casts on the shelf were not far from him, and their expression was as if they were making a stupid, apoplectic attempt to attend to the conversation. Now, my young friend, my guardian began, as if I were a witness in the box, I'm going to have a word or two with you. If you please, sir. What do you suppose, said Mr. Jaggers, bending forward to look at the ground and then throwing his head back to look at the ceiling. What do you suppose you are living at the rate of? At the rate of, sir? At, repeated Mr. Jaggers, still looking at the ceiling. The rate of. And then looked all around the room and paused with his pocket handkerchief in his hand, halfway to his nose. I had looked into my affairs so often that I had thoroughly destroyed any slight notion I might ever had of their earnings, of their bearings. Reluctantly, I confessed myself quite unable to answer the question. This reply seemed agreeable to Mr. Jaggers, who said, I thought so, and blew his nose with an air of satisfaction. Now, I have asked you a question, my friend, said Mr. Jaggers. Have you anything to ask me? Of course it would be a great relief to me to ask you several questions, sir, but I remember your prohibition. Ask one, said Mr. Jaggers. Is my benefactor to be made known to me one day? No. Ask another. Is that confidence to be imparted to me soon? Wait that moment, said Mr. Jaggers, and ask another. I looked about me, but there appeared to be now no possible escape from the inquiry. Have I anything to receive, sir? On that, Mr. Jaggers said triumphantly, I thought we should come to it, and called to Wemmick to give him that piece of paper. Wemmick appeared, handed it in, and disappeared. Now, Mr. Pip, said Mr. Jaggers, attend, if you please. You have been drawing pretty freely here. Your name occurs pretty often in Wemmick's cash book, but you're in debt, of course. I'm afraid I must say yes, sir. You know you must say yes, don't you? Said Mr. Jaggers. Yes, sir. I don't ask you what you owe, because you don't know. And if you did know, you won't tell me. You would say less. Yes, yes, my friend, cried Mr. Jaggers, waving his forefinger to stop me as I made a show of protesting. It is likely enough that you think you wouldn't, but you would. You excuse me, but I know better than you. Now, take this piece of paper in your hand. You have got it? Very good. Now unfold it and tell me what it is. This is a banknote, said I, for £500. That is a banknote, repeated Mr. Jaggers, for £500. And a very handsome sum of money too, I think. You consider it so? How could I do otherwise? But answer the question, said Mr. Jaggers. Undoubtedly. You consider it undoubtedly a handsome sum of money. Now, that handsome sum of money, Pip, is your own. It is a present to you on this day, in earnest of your expectations, and at the rate of that handsome sum of money per annum, and at no higher rate. You are to live under the donor of the whole appears. That is to say, you will now take your money affairs entirely into your own hands, and you will draw from Wemmick £125 per quarter, until you are in communication with the fountainhead, and no longer with the mere agent. As I have told you before, I am the mere agent. I execute my instructions and I am paid for doing so. I think them injudicious, but I am not paid for giving any opinion on their merits. I was beginning to express my gratitude to my benefactor for the great liberality with which I was treated, when Mr. Jaggers stopped me. I am not paid, Pip, said he coolly, to carry your words to anyone, and then gathered up his coat-tails as he had gathered up the subject, and stood frowning at his boots as if he suspected them of designs against him. After a pause, I hinted, there was a question just now, Mr. Jaggers, which you desired me to wait for a moment. I hope I am doing nothing wrong in asking it again. What is it? Said he. I might have known that he would never help me out, but it took me aback to have to shape the question afresh, as if it were quite new. Is it likely, I said after hesitating, that my patron, the fountainhead you have spoken of, Mr. Jaggers, will soon, there I delicately stopped. Will soon what? Asked Mr. Jaggers. There's no question as it stands, you know. Will soon come to London, said I, after casting about for a precise form of words. Or summon me anywhere else? Now here, replied Mr. Jaggers, fixing me for the first time with his dark, deep-set eyes. We must revert to the evening when we first encountered one another in your village. What did I tell you then, Pip? You told me, Mr. Jaggers, that it might be years since when that person appeared. Just so, said Mr. Jaggers. That's my answer. As we looked full at one another, I felt my breath come quicker and my strong desire to get something out of him. And as I felt that it came quicker, and as I felt that he saw that it came quicker, I felt that I had less chance than ever of getting anything out of him. Do you suppose it will still be years hence, Mr. Jaggers? Mr. Jaggers shook his head, not in negativing the question, but in altogether negativing the notion that he could anyhow be got to answer it. And the two horrible casts of the twitched face looked, when my eyes strayed up to them, as if they had come to a crisis in their suspended attention, and were going to sneeze. Come, said Mr. Jaggers, warming the backs of his legs with the backs of his warm hands. I'll be plain with you, my friend Pip. That's a question I must not be asked. You understand that better when I tell you it's a question that might compromise me. Come, I'll go a little further with you. I'll say something more. He bent down so low to frown at his boots that he was able to rub the calves of his legs in the pause he made. When that person discloses, said Mr. Jaggers, straightening himself, you and that person will settle your own affairs. When the person discloses, my part in this business will cease and determine. When that person discloses, it will not be necessary for me to know anything about it, and that's all I have got to say. We looked at one another until I withdrew my eyes and looked thoughtfully at the floor. From this last speech, I derived the notion that Miss Havisham, for some reason or no reason, had not taken him into her confidence as to her designing me for Estella, that he resented this and felt a jealousy about it, or that he really did object to that scheme and would have nothing to do with it. When I raised my eyes again, I found that he had been shrewdly looked at me all the time and was doing so still. If that is all you have to say, sir, I remarked, there can be nothing left for me to say. He nodded assent and pulled out his Steve-dreaded watch and asked me where I was going to dine. I replied in my own chambers with Herbert. As a necessary sequence, I asked him if he would favor us with his company, and he promptly accepted the invitation, but he insisted on walking home with me, in order that I might make no extra preparation for him. And first he had a letter or two to write and had his hands to wash. So I said I would go into the outer office and talk to women. The fact was that when the £500 had come into my pocket, a thought had come into my head which had been often there before, and it appeared to me that Wemmick was a good person to advise with concerning such thought. He had already locked up his safe and made preparations for going home. He had left his desk, brought out his two greasy office candlesticks and stood them in line with the snuffers on the slab near the door, ready to be extinguished. He had raked his fire low, put his ragged and greatcoat ready, and was speeding himself all over the chest with his safe key as an athletic exercise after business. Mr. Wemmick, said I want to ask your opinion. I'm very desirous to serve a friend. Wemmick tightened his post office and shook his head, as if his opinion were dead against any fatal weakness of that sort. This friend, I pursued, is trying to get on in commercial life, but has no money, and finds it difficult and disheartening to make a beginning. Now, I want somehow to help him do a beginning. With money down? Said Wemmick, in a tone drier than any sawdust. With some money down, I replied, with an uneasy remembrance shot across me of that symmetrical bundle of papers at home. With some money down, and perhaps some anticipation of my expectations. Mr. Pip, said Wemmick, I should like just to run over with you on my fingers, if you please, the names of the various bridges as high as Chelsea reach. Let's see, there's London, 1, Southwark, 2, Blackfriars, 3, Waterloo, 4, Westminster, 5, Vauxhall, 6. He had checked off each bridge in his turn with the handle of his safe key on the palm of his hand. There's as many as 6, you see, to choose from. I don't understand you, said I. Choose your bridge, Mr. Pip, returned Wemmick, and take a walk upon your bridge, and pitch your money into the Thames over the centre arch of your bridge, and you know the end of it. Serve a friend with it, and you may know the end of it too. But it's a less pleasant and profitable end. I could have posted a newspaper in his mouth. He made it so wide after saying this. This is very discouraging, said I. Meant to be so, said Wemmick. Then is it your opinion, I inquired with some little indignation, that a man should never invest portable property in a friend? Said Wemmick. Certainly he should not, unless he wants to get rid of the friend. And then it becomes a question how much portable property it may be worth to get rid of him. And that, said I, is your deliberate opinion, Mr. Wemmick. That, he returned, is my deliberate opinion in this office. Ah, said I, pressing him, for I thought I saw him near a loophole here. But would that be your opinion at Walworth? Mr. Pip, he replied with gravity, Walworth is one place, and this office is another. Much as the aged is one person and Mr. Jaggers is another. They must not be confounded together. My Walworth sentiments must be taken at Walworth. None but my official sentiments can be taken in this office. Very well, said I, much relieved. Then I shall look you up at Walworth. You may depend upon it. Mr. Pip, he returned, you will be welcome there in a private and personal capacity. We had held this conversation in low voice, well knowing my guardian's ears to be the sharpest of the sharp. As he now appeared in his doorway, towering his hands, Wemmick got on his greatcoat and stood by to snuff out the candles. We all three went into the street together, and from the doorstep Wemmick turned his way. Mr. Jaggers and I turned ours. I could not help wishing more than once that evening that Mr. Jaggers had an aged in Gerrard Street, or Stinger, or something, or somebody to unbend his brows a little. It was an uncomfortable consideration on a 21st birthday that coming of age at all seemed hardly worthwhile in such a guarded and suspicious world as he made of it. He was 1,000 times better informed and cleverer than Wemmick, and yet I would 1,000 times rather have had Wemmick to dinner. And Mr. Jaggers made not me alone intensely melancholy, because after he was gone, Herbert said of himself, with his eyes fixed on the fire, that he thought he must have committed a felony or forgotten the details of it. He felt so dejected and guilty. 即係成個故仔就係講真係有錢俾佢。係啊。500蚊。係啊。係咪？一年分4次俾佢，咁呢個錢就足夠佢還債㗎啦。咁但係佢而家諗嘅唔係要。係咯，我想要啲錢嚟。唔係要還債，佢係想嚟。終於係想嚟搞生意，佢話係借俾朋友，可能係 Herbert 啦，但係其實就係佢想攞啲錢嚟做生意。但係咩生意咧？佢完全冇提過嘅喎，呢個故事，提都冇提過，所以而家係好空泛嘅。佢亦都有可能係佢想攞啲錢嚟幫阿 Herbert 還債嘅。咁但係佢呢度唔係咁講嘛，佢呢度係話佢嘅朋友想搞個小生意。咁我相信佢係講真話嘅，佢係想幫 Herbert 搞生意，亦都幫自己啦。咁但係 Wemmick 點答佢咧 ？Wemmick 就話：你求其揀條橋，然之後倒啲錢落河度啦。個結果同你借錢嘅朋友一樣嘅，即係叫佢你咪倒錢落海啊！咁阿 Pip 就哇你咁講嘢嘅，佢話事實係咁咯，我就係想你咁諗。佢話：喂，而家呢個係 office 嘅你講嘢啊，定係喺你屋企講嘢嘅你？因為之前咧未有同佢講過佢有兩個身份。佢話呢個係 office 嘅我講。佢話：喂，咁我遲啲去你屋企咪再問你啦。咁然之後阿 Wemmick 就 OK 好啊，我會歡迎你再嚟問我嘅。咁然之後阿 Pip 就跟咗阿 Mr. Jaggers 去食飯啦。佢生日飯啦，21歲大個仔啦。其實真係大，唔係好似話大個仔啊，真係成人嚟㗎啦嚇！絕對係一個法定嘅成人嚟㗎啦。就算係100幾年嗰陣時都係絕對係需要去開間公司又好，點樣都好，即係要搞下生意咯咁但係佢嚟到呢個位都仲係好空泛，唔知道。同埋冇講到話邊個俾啲錢佢，如果講咗嘅話咧 ，Mr. Jaggers 就係啦，佢即係佢好大篇幅就係講緊究竟我嘅 benefactor 係邊個又或者佢點樣，佢會唔會自己出現啊？佢會點樣？但係 Jaggers 似乎就 對於呢一個 benefactor 出現就其實佢甚至乎有一種感覺係佢唔係好想，因為佢講到明就係、如果呢個 benefactor 俾你知道咗係邊個出現，佢、自己 disclose 咗自己咧，我個 role 就完結㗎啦。但係 meanwhile 佢一日唔出現咧，我一日有呢個 role 咧，我一日都有錢收。其實係有呢個關係，好微妙嘅關係喺度。咁但係 Jaggers 係咪志在呢個錢咧？咁如果係嘅話，咁都唔少錢喎。咁你 Jaggers 都揾幾多錢下㗎嘛？作為一個律師係嘛？咁而喺呢一刻，亦都 Miss Havisham 個名再次出現啦。即係喺呢一刻，即係係啦，即係阿 Pip 都即係10成係覺得係 Miss Havisham 啦。咁我相信一般嘅讀者都會咁諗。當然我會有啲保留嘅，即係可能佢會俾驚喜我哋咧。咁但係去到呢一刻為止，即係作為佢嘅 benefactor，的確最有可能就係 Miss Havisham。即係我又諗唔到有其他邊個。即係唔會係阿joe噶嘛，冇可能係阿joe噶嘛。即係如果係阿joe又好，呢個故事寫得好差㗎啦。會唔會係嗰個佢放走咗嘅囚犯咧？會唔會係 Mr. Jaggers 咧？我覺得都好問啊 ，Mr. Jaggers 會唔會係Wemmick 咧，即係 Wemmick 原來係假扮係個 clerk 嚟嘅咁樣咧，會唔會咧？即係有啲牽強咯，係咯。咁再睇啦，好嘛？咁即係希望會快啲決定點樣去使嗰啲錢啦，即係快啲俾我哋知道佢點樣去決定點去揾錢啦，幫自己還債又好，當係娶阿 Estella 嘅老婆伴又好，即係咁樣嘅故事先有得推進嘅。佢同佢鄉下都 cut 晒 ties， 佢連家姐都死埋啦。阿joe 真係變咗一個冇咁親嘅親人，係咪？咁佢真係佢嘅 life 就喺倫敦，即係佢一定要發奮，好嘛？咁下次繼續講啦。OK，take care，拜拜。